With all of the negative headlines dominating the news these days, it can be difficult to spot signs of progress. What makes you optimistic about the future? People here are talking about cancer cure here. Stanford Medicine made the biggest breakthrough in history just last month. They cured 90 out of 90 infected mice with different kinds of cancers with just one shot of medicine. All 7 of my honeybee colonies are currently surviving the winter, and today they're bringing in the first pollen of the year. Edit. Also, please support native bees. For why and how at home, check out Bringing Nature Home by Douglas Tallamy, as well as *BUTTERFLIES like the monarch, and bats. The good news is often quiet and subtle. The bad news is always loud. I try to remember that. Our headlines are splashed with crime, yet for every criminal there are 10,000 honest, decent, kindly men. If it were not so, no child would live to grow up. Business could not go on from day to day. Decency is not news. It is buried in the obituaries, but is a force stronger than crime. The possible return of the American chestnut tree. Fast growing, rot resistant, and, perhaps most important, it produces enough calories from the nuts to feed a population. Edit. It turned out that someone from WBUR in Boston saw the interest in this post and wrote an article and made a podcast about it. It's very good. As someone who has lost loved ones to cancer, I have been recently diagnosed with stage 2 astrocytoma, cancer of the brain and spinal cord. Studies like this make me happy for our younger generations, that they might not have to see so much suffering. Thank you for sharing. I needed a lift up and you provided. I'm very sorry for your losses. Be well and eat those veggies. My students. They handle a complex, globally interconnected society in ways my generation, undergraduate at university in the 1970s, couldn't hold a candle to. Any color, any sexual orientation, any disability, any nationality, it's all good, so long as they are not an asshole. We may be approximating Dr. Martin Luther King's hope for a world where people are judged by the content of their character, rather than the color of their skin. I see the same thing in my students. I teach preschool, and today a little boy whose parents are from Somalia, a little boy who was born in Kyrgyzstan, a little boy from Peru, and a little girl whose parents are from Mexico built a castle together. They don't care what color you are or where you're from. They just like building together. Bee population is on the rise. If we could work together to save the bees, we can deal with climate change. I hope we can deal with climate change, but it is a much bigger problem than the bees, mostly because the bees aren't costing anyone billions of dollars. Advancements in medicine and gene therapy. The CRISPR technology has me very excited. Also, the James Webb Space Telescope is going to bring about many new discoveries. It feels like we haven't had a huge discovery recently. Hopefully we get something big within a decade or so. Edit. As people have pointed out, we have made some significant discoveries recently. Advancements in health studies and science for health has improved living conditions tenfold, and continue to do so. So that makes me pretty optimistic. No one lives forever, no one. But with advances in modern science and my high level income, it's not crazy to think I can live to be 245, maybe 300. Eater. This is a quote from Talladega Nights. I'm not being serious. Understanding of history. We are at a certain point in time, during which we are well aware of what happened in the past. This is a newly available, highly useful feature of our generation. Hopefully it lasts. Censorship. Check out the following YouTube channels: Crash Course World History, Extra Credits, Historia Civilis, World War I channel. I love you back, not a channel, but I'm really feeling your comment. Mental illness awareness is growing rapidly, and people are more and more willing to assist those in need. Not only that, but people with mental illness are become less and less ashamed of said illnesses and actually seeking out help. Stigma goes both ways. Edit. Stop bringing up gun politics on my comment, you goddamned vultures. The fact that humanity is getting another mini space race going on. I'd love to see a man set foot on Mars in my lifetime. That, and of course just getting to spend time with all my friends, to play Dungeons and Dragons every week. Edit. I'm fine with my top comment being about D&D in space. Let's do D&D in space, boys. I'm reminded of Sam's speech to Frodo in Osgiliath in the Two Towers. It's like in the great stories Mr. Frodo point the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. Because they were holding on to something, that there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for. I also think on these two quotes when looking to be optimistic about the world. Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. It is the small everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. Why Bilbo Baggins? Perhaps because I'm afraid, and he gives me courage. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. To this day, especially in times of disaster, I remember my mother's words and I'm always comforted by realizing that there are still so many helpers, so many caring people in this world. Wikipedia has substantial problems, but in terms of time it only took 0.5% of America's yearly television consumption to get the encyclopedia to where it was in 2008 or 2010. I forget which. Just let that sink in for a moment, forget the problems for a moment. 0.5% of our annual TV consumption created a massive aggregation of summaries and citations of human knowledge. What could we do with 1% of focused human effort? People are beginning to realize that things don't change on their own. More people are taking action to help out and change the world as a whole. Just sat through a domestic abuse/violence seminar this morning. I can certainly appreciate that we as world people can see an issue and raise the red flag and wave it vigorously. No more of this, well, that's just the way it is business. Rape, abuse whether child or partner, racism, discrimination, etc. We are able to stand up and say, hell no, shit ain't happening on my watch. There is help out there. Your B problem? Get fixed. There are so many avenues now that are there to help any problem you may be having. Use it. Everyone has problems. That's the only thing that stays the same. It's important that we recognize this and put aside our pride and get help. And that is what makes me have hope for the future. For humanity. Much to the amazement of the trauma surgeons who first received me at the hospital, after I'd been found on the side of the road with a face full glass, after being on the receiving end of a hit and run. I'm not brain dead, brain damaged, quadriplegic, paraplegic, nor did they even have to make me an amputee. I'm learning to walk again. The future is looking good. Until I have to go through that sad again, that is. Edit. Before. 3 months after. My new worst case scenario is I need to sell some of my new titanium parts for scrap metal. Reruns of Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers. Got drunk one night and watched some Bob Ross on Netflix, and it was a revelation, man. It's impossible to feel bad when you're watching him paint. So much joy. I guess that's why they called it the joy of painting. That every day millions of people go to work in order to provide for their families, come home, talk about inane things, etc. The world over consists mostly of people with similar wants and similar needs, no matter from where they hail or what they look like, and the vast majority of the time it just works. One tiny lapse in coordination, and it could all come crumbling down, but mostly the world marches on. It's a brilliant blue ball of common humanity, and it pays to remember sometimes that for all that's horrible in the world, we are surrounded by a lot of good. As someone with mental health issues, I love that the field is getting more attention, and there's becoming less of a stigma of having a mental illness. A relative of mine checked into a mental hospital yesterday for depression and bipolar disorder. The amount of support he received from friends and family was very encouraging. The plummeting price of solar and wind energy. Edit. Thanks for the gold. I will be investing it in solar. Absolute upvote. In Australia there has been incredible penetration of solar power in the last 10 years, all driven by the economics of solar power. In the last 10 years. Well, 2018 is even better than the last 10 years in terms of prices, payoff periods, and sales of solar panels have reflected that. People are installing their panels en masse with zero subsidies. Businesses big and small, covering their roofs. It is so crazy. There may be a glut of power in SAM when the sun shines, at least. Edit. SA equals SOUTH Australia. THX/U/royalds in as few as 5 years time, considering the rate of growth. On one Sunday, a few months ago, 50% of all power in SAD was generated by rooftop solar alone. That's not even including wind and other large-scale renewables. We don't have hydro in SAD. The magic of all this is that it only took a few years of government investment. The market has ramped up, partly and thanks to those subsidies. We are reaping benefits, and we will be for years to come. The end. Thanks for watching.